Hello and welcome to another Midweek Shakedown on O's Across the Pond. Coming up in episode 10, a review of another brutal series loss in Milwaukee. We analyse Michael Elias' comments to the press after the dismissal of Brandon Hyde. And we look forward, if we can, to the upcoming 4-game series in Boston. Will it be cheers as we look to move back south to the sanctity of Camden Yards? Or will it be us looking to be St elsewhere? Joining me today, we have Grant and Thomas. Evening all.
Hi folks.
Evening all. The O's finally won a game, eh? It's nice to be doing an episode where we've got a win to talk about.
Yeah, especially as we were probably going to record last night before the game, so we wouldn't have had the joy of watching Adley Rutschman pop that 3-run home run over in the 11th. But we'll come to that in a minute. So let's pick up where we left off. The team flew west to the American Family Field, hoping to start something as a catalyst to kickstart the season. However, it didn't quite go to plan. Thomas, how did you see the first 2 games? As chairman of the Holiday Fanboy Club, did he continue to impress?
So we'll get on to my boy Jackson in a minute. But yeah, the first 2 games, disappointing, utterly disappointing. Really, there seems to be a continuation of a culture that I've noticed. I'd mentioned it earlier on in the season about kind of commitments. There was a couple of instances, players running through onto first and that kind of culture looks like it seeped in again, and it looked like a heads down culture. The moment we go down, you just see the heads drop, and professional sportsmen, especially if they want to be winners, can't have that. Coaches need to eradicate that. Yeah, I think that comes by getting a winning coach in the future. Onto the players, for Cano was awful again. I think he's had 5 woeful performances this one from him. Batista didn't look good in game 2. Positives, Jackson Holiday again, proving he's an everyday player and how important he is now to the team. He's leading by example. He's leading off with some gumption in him. I'd say him and Uncle Tommy, as I refer to him, Sagano, they've been the 2 probably consistents this season. We've had players who have had good periods, but I'd say Jackson and Sagano have been consistent all season now. Jackson especially since the hitting coaches, his dad, that was not hitting coaches because they don't do anything, sorted his hands out. It was great to see Seddy go yard again. Look, Ryan O'Hearn just keeps doing Ryan O'Hearn things. I know that makes you really happy, Andy, considering you're the chairman of the O'Hearn Club.
Absolutely.
Mountcastle, I've still got a concern over Mountcastle. I still don't think he's doing enough. There's still questions to be asked about him. The diplomats out there will point to that he may be starting to get hits and there may be an upward trend, but I think he's been below average all season. Now, I think there is massive questions to be asked over Ryan Mountcastle. Rutschman will obviously talk about his game 3 performance, but Mountcastle has probably been the biggest disappointment this season, closely followed by Adley.
So, Grant, was there any hope shining through at the end of the tunnel in those games?
Not particularly. The first 2 games, they were really a continuation of what we've seen and what we've been watching for most of the season. Watching the games, I'm sure most people feel the same. It just feels like the team are beat as soon as they go a run down or they have a bad inning, it just feels that's a game over. The confidence is not there. Game 1 was a 5-4 loss, so it was close. Unfortunately, Dean Kramer gave up 3 runs in the second inning, and again, the confidence just seeps away when we get that big inning against us early in the game. We did get back into it, as Thomas said. Big hit from Cedric Mullins in the 7th. At the time, that got us back to 4-4 in the game. Unfortunately, Cano very poor in the 8th when he was trying to just keep us alive. Gave the lead straight back. Unfortunately for Cano and for the Orioles, he's given up runs in his last 3 outings, and he's given up runs in 5 of his last 7 outings, including multiple runs in 3 of those. His ERA for the season is up to 5.06, and if we just take the last 7 appearances, the ERA is 15.19, which is getting up towards Charlie Morton and Kyle Gibson territory, as we've seen in spells. So very disappointing for somebody who has been a real linchpin for the bullpen. A regular contributor, doesn't miss a lot of games, is always ready to go. He did start the season with 13 straight scoreless appearances, so he's got it in him. We know that, we've seen it. It's going to be very difficult for the O's bullpen to do much if he does not get back on his horse.
Yeah, I recall seeing a stat that was something like 0 for the last 30 odd when losing in the 6th. It really confirms your point about being dead when we're behind.
Yeah, 0 for 39 when losing from the 6th inning or later, and that
Crazy.
was a stat until Game 3 this week, where we did come back. Game 2 of the series is pretty forgettable. O's lost 5-2. We did have a bit of interest seeing Chase McDermott get another chance to pitch. He was afforded an opener. Keegan Aitken came in, did a very good job again in that role, a scoreless first inning. McDermott in the end through 4 2/3 innings, gave up 4 hits, 3 runs. I suppose you could class it as a Dean Kramer level start in terms of what we've seen. He also walked 5, which is certainly a concern. And while it's not a disaster, I felt he looked more confident and composed in his first start. He settled down after giving up runs early, and he looked to have a bit about him. He was sent back down, so we're probably not going to see him again. It looks like Charlie Morton is returning to the rotation. And this was just an option, a chance to get him into a game when we were making those roster moves and getting Gibson out of there. In the game too, we did get 8 hits, so that is usually enough to have a chance of winning the game, but we didn't really string it together until the 7th. Mountcastle, Elias and Holiday all getting hits in that inning to score Elias and Mountcastle. So we were back in it at that point, only 3-2 down, but almost a carbon copy of Cano, the game 1. Felix Bautista came in and really had a clunker, gave up 2 runs in the 8th, and again the confidence, that was a game over. There was almost no chance we were going to get back into it. So if we combine that with Bautista giving up a run in the 9th on game 3, that is back-to-back poor appearances for Felix. So there has been talk of him throwing more and getting more into the game and playing more regularly, and there seemed to be a kind of a party line that the reason he was poor is because he's not thrown a lot, and he was coming in kind of cold this week. So we'll see what unfolds over the weekend and what opportunities he gets.
I agree, Grant. I mean, game 3, you just touched upon Bautista, another mini implosion for him. It was his first back-to-back game for 21 months.
Yeah,
but the problem is, you're right. He has to get pitching more regularly. But with him and Cano, who were literally the setup man and the closer together, both not doing the business, maybe there's other things at play at the moment with both of them being off form. That's a big worry.
It's a big worry. It's a small sample, but we do need those 2 guys. There's not going to be much of a bullpen if those 2 guys are not pitching well.
I think obviously with Bautista, I think he touched on it yesterday. Obviously, I think game 2 was his first game for 5 days, and Ben McDonald had said in commentary as well that the mechanics, because he's so tall and where he's missing the ball, he's getting on top of himself. He's obviously said, I'm not used to playing every That's not his fault. He hasn't been playing because we've been so poor. Yeah. There hasn't been situations for him to come in. Obviously, we're going to mention him about game 3 in a minute, but I think maybe with the pair of them, because Kano isn't, he's not a small guy. Maybe that is both a mechanics things. They're just getting ahead of each other in their mechanics. Ben McDonald mentioned it last night.
Yeah, certainly Bautista was throwing a lot of balls up above the zone, which, very, very easy when you're starting off with that height. I'm sure it's very easy for the hitters to see that and just leave him alone. And,
Yeah.
So he knows what he's got to do. He's done it before. Both of them have. So they just need to get in the lab, get down to business, and hopefully get into a good rhythm.
Yeah, I mean, his best pitches are not high fastballs, are they? They're the other stuff that you set yourself up for, the sinker, everything else that he throws. So looking more into Game 3, it looked like it was going to be the same thing. It really did look as though we were going to go into another disaster. You had Bautista blowing his first save. Baker then came on. It's not off. It was mentioned in commentary. You don't often get a second blown save, and we did. So we blew it again in the 10th after we'd scored a run in the top of the 10th, only for the whole team to finally come through and save the day in what is unusually our first visit to the 11th this season. Thomas, is your good friend Adley Rutschman back?
So let's just please calm it on the Adley Rutschman back talk. I have a go at, I do have a dig at Grant in the WhatsApp group anytime the O's look like they're winning or they do win a game. Grant is the first person to comment, are the O's back? And he's kind of like a curse.
There were several of us last night, yes.
Yeah, so if we can just knock on, is anything like prefix to the word, are we back? Can we just leave that until we're at 500?
Absolutely
no,
not.
Fair enough.
It'll be the whole season, almost certainly.
But yeah, look, I've slated Adley this year, and look, rightly so. Some people might say some of the stuff I've said about him's been harsh, but at the end of the day, he has been poor.
Absolutely.
The stats prove that how critical he is to this organisation for us to win games since he made his big league debut, which coincidentally was 3 years ago yesterday. What a way to kind of celebrate 3 years in the big leagues by crushing a big 3-run homer. So, no, I'd off me capturing, but can we just calm it, because it needs to be consistent for a while. There's a saying in England about when the sun comes out, a single swallow does not a summer make. So let's just calm it a bit. You look, his last 7 games, he's batting .296, but his last 15 games, he's batting .208 with an OBP of .250. His last 30 games, he's batting .208. So let's just wait and see. If he can get his next 30 games somewhere, above .250, and then I'll happily say, look, he's back. But he is critical for us to win. Again, we've said Bautista, he was poor in game 2, carried that into game 3. You can see it is purely just mechanics. It's the first time he's thrown back-to-back games since, I think, 23.
Yep.
So, you listen to the dulcet tones of Ben McDonald. It is a mechanics thing. It's something that hopefully the pitching staff can get into. I think if we get into a situation tonight, we're not going to see him tonight. And he's got a day off Thursday, so we'll probably see him next Friday if needed. But yeah, there was a lot of positives in that game. I'd mentioned, I don't think it was Sundays, because that was the Brandon Hyde episode, wasn't it? It might have been the Thursday or the Sunday before, where we were talking about the big hits when it mattered. We were getting runners in scoring position, but we just weren't getting the big hits. Look, Heston Kjerstad, another one. I've been a fan of him when he's come back in this season to the injury to Cowser. He had a great run, and then he quietened off. He started to pick up again now. I don't know whether that's subconsciously in his head. He's seeing that Cowser's starting to make some appearance. He obviously made an appearance the other night for Aberdeen, I think. Whether he's now had a need to kick on again here. But I thought he was great. That hit, what was that, in the 11th or 10th? When did he have that big hit? Was it before? Yeah. So look, I made up for it. There was a lot of positives there. getting the hits where it mattered quite easily, as we've seen all season. The moment we'd gone behind again there, or even when they'd come back and tied the game, the heads could have dropped because you've gone, let's just pack our stuff up, lads, get on the plane and get up to Boston for a tea party. But you know, the finally, you know, pulled the socks off.
Yeah,
Took accountability.
I agree on Kerstad. I think his hit was in the 10th because he ended up being the runner on second base when
That's
the
right.
11th started. So therefore, he was the one that plated the tying, what would have been the winning run in the 10th. So all good. Grant, any final thoughts on the Milwaukee series?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, even in a poor season, because there's so many games, you're still going to get kind of highlights in games like this that are exciting and that turn out well for us. Just as in terms of that game 3, there was a lot of good things that happened for us to win that game. Sagano was excellent, 6 innings, 2 earned runs. The bullpen, even with Bautista's miss, still went. Obviously, 5 innings for 1 earned run. Baker's blown save was not an earned run because it was a ghost runner that scored. And we got 14 hits. You know, a lot of them were due to the Brewers fielders standing right back at the wall and letting balls drop in. But we still got 14 hits.
Very bizarre.
Very bizarre. And the big thing is something that we've not done this season. We got to come from behind late charge to win, and that's the late rallies are something that has just not happened. It was so important for us in 2023. We were never out of a game, especially these games that are only 4 or 5 runs that we're conceding. We should be well in these games. We should be asking questions later in the games, even when we have given up 3 or 4 runs off the starter. And that, to put a season over 160 games together, you're going to have to do that more than half the time. When you're down, you're going to have to at least get back into some of those games.
Obviously, especially with the state of the pitching as well.
There's nothing. The bullpen was pretty good, but it certainly regressed as it's been asked to do a lot more work. So, as I've always said, the success of this team is going to live or die on the hitting. So we have started to see that come good. We've got players to come back. Adley Rutschman. Ultimately, the Orioles' success is linked to Adley Rutschman. I don't think it's a coincidence that we got good in May 2022 when he was called up. And I also don't think it's a coincidence that we've been very bad since July of last year, since he's been off form. So, yes, you could shuffle him down. Yes, you could bring in another catcher to catch a few more games that's more of a first team player. I don't think they're going to do it. Certainly going to do that this season. We need Adley to be Adley to have any chance of trending back towards 500 this season and being competitive next year. I think that is something that is certain after the first almost 2 months of the season.
So moving on, we had Michael Elias stand up before the media on Tuesday, paying his tribute to the now departed Brandon Hyde. And taking through us on his thoughts on how the Orioles will be turning it around under Tony Mansolino. Grant, I know you spent some time going through the interview. What's your take on the message that he broadcast to the world's media? And more importantly to us, what's your take on the message to the fans of the Orioles?
Yeah, I mean, I think Elias looked crestfallen. I think he looked shell-shocked. And personally, I think that's why he didn't come out on Sunday or even Monday and do something. I think he's been dealing with this personally, that he realises that this is such a bad season. It's a personal failure. He would never have imagined in any scenario that I certainly wouldn't have either, that he would have been dismissing the manager, installing Tony Mansolino as an interim coach. I would doubt if he has been told that his own future has been decided upon, but he clearly realises that this season will be a failure. We're not going to come out of this to have a successful season in terms of results. And he personally has made some serious miscalculations about the acquisitions that were made, especially the pitching acquisitions, thinking it would be enough when it's been miles away from being enough. And he's now managed away a lot of what he built up. You know, we've seen a lot of those minor league prospects graduate and be either pretty decent or not as good as we hoped. And we've traded away another chunk of those guys who were, you know, the part of this number one farm system. So, you know, this is the fruition. This is the fruits of his labour, and this is supposed to be the best season. This was supposed to be the good season when it all came together and we started spending money. It's not going to happen. This season is done. And I'm sure he also knows that he will never, ever get the chance to do that again, to do such a big rebuild, where you've got all the tools at your disposal, you've got a free hand to do what you want to do, you've got the organisation basically just letting you go on with it. And I think he did think that he could do this. He was clever enough, and he has planned to get all these deep draft picks and not have to spend any money, would work. But it's not going to work. You know, you do need, unless you get some absolute monster talents, you know, you get an Aaron Judge and a Shohei Ohtani coming through in the same kind of generation. Ultimately, it's too competitive. You do need to spend money. You're not going to do it all on draft picks. I don't have a huge problem with anything that he said in the press conference. I think he was pretty honest about his own failures with the pitching. And you know, he did make the point about the underperformances of the batting. He failed to mention that the biggest monetary contract that he dished out was to Tyler O'Neill, who has been one of the reasons for the underperformance in the batting. But there's other players there, obviously, that are not doing it. So yeah, I don't have an issue with what he said, but I do worry about his mentality going forward. That he definitely has to change the approach if he's going to remain in post. We'll find out over the next 6 or 8 months what David Rubenstein thinks to that, whether he does have the trust of Elias, whether he is going to change the approach and spend money, or he's going to leave Elias to do what he's been doing and leave it up to him to make those decisions. You know, that's certainly a known unknown at this stage.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of open questions about Elias. That I think the next weeks and months are certainly going to be a challenging time for him, but more importantly for the Orioles. It's certainly going to be going into the draft, which will be with us before too long. Will they decide to make a change before the draft so that we don't fall into another problem? I've no idea, but let's see. Thomas, you got any thoughts on that?
As Grant said, you know, Grant used that he looked crestfallen. I'd say he looked like a startled deer in the headlights. Look, I don't like the fact it took him 3 days to come out with address the media.
Yeah.
That's bang out of order. Like, no matter what kind of society you live in, or what job you have, or how high up, or whatever, if you are getting rid of somebody out of a job, an explanation there and then on the day, you know, he's a leader in a sport organisation. He's the general manager of a decent sized sport organisation. It's about having accountability for your decisions and facing up to them.
Yeah.
You know, bear in mind, this is a guy who said he double guesses his decisions, every decision he makes, and we covered that the other week. I'm sure he wants and he needs the players to be accountable for their performances this season. So how about you try leading by an example? You know, shit rolls downhill. If you're not leading from the top of the organisation, then I don't see how that translates. You see it in all kinds of sports. How many leaders in sports that have won things? It's all about setting an example at the top. It starts at the top of the shop and it rolls down. You can't. It baffles me. Some of his comments, I just didn't get. I think obviously there is a massive disappointment about the season and the way it's gone, the work he undertook, or the lack of work, should I say, during the off season and spring training. I think it's fair to say, you know, Michael Elias is on the clock now. I kind of put it another way last week about him being in the gallows and he's got a noose around his neck. We've discussed it in the WhatsApp group about Elias going, and there seems to be concern that if we did make a change at general manager, then our window shuts and we'd have to start the rebuilding process all again. Look, I don't think that is the case at all. If we change the GM, I think there's enough talent there now in the team that are under control for a good few years. I think if we can I'd like to see, obviously, we're not going to get any big extensions during the season, but I'd like to see probably Shigano get an extension before the deadline, a bit of commitments. He's been consistent. Maybe is there a conversation to be had with Sedi, just to, what kind of value is he going to be after? If you can extend them two before the deadline, probably only look at losing. I think O'Hearn is going to be on the form he's in. Then he can go into next season potentially with a new general manager and the depth that we have got in the farm. You know, there is players there up and coming. This again, Elias has overseen us get to a number 1 ranked farm system. So where I mentioned the other week, we're now number ranked 15. So his grip is, I think he's lost his grip on this organisation at the moment. I think there will be a change. I don't think it closes our window. And the last thing I kind of want to say, maybe there's a bit of irony in this, that Elias said the clubhouse needed a new voice and a change of direction this week, and that's why he made the change. Maybe Rubenstein is weighing up on whether the front office needs the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he is. He's not a daft person. He's been very vocal in the fact that he wants to win with this team. He's a gentleman of a certain age. He's got a lot of money in the bank, or he's got a lot of money available to him. We've got other wealthy people on the ownership group. So my feeling is that if there is not going to be a drastic change in strategy, if they are happy to continue doing what they're doing, Elias will stay. If there is going to be a change in strategy and they're going to start spending a lot more money, then I don't think Elias is the person to do that. I think his track record at bringing in free agents and giving out decent contracts is not good enough. Even with, you throw a few $100 million at it, or a billion at it over the course of the next 5 or 10 years, we're still not going to be the richest team in baseball. We're not going to compete with the Mets, the Dodgers, the Yankees, etc. So you do still need a bit of guile and a bit of smarts about it, in terms of what you spend and where you get the draft picks and what you do with those guys. We've been very good at drafting. We've been very good at trading away players to get things back. We're going to have to do both of those things this year. That is going to be Elias's wheelhouse for the rest of the season. I'm sure we'll all be very disappointed when O'Hearn, Mullins, Sagano, Eflin are all traded. I think they will be. I don't agree with it.
Do you not think there could be an extension for Sagano?
I don't think at this stage. I think if he is going to stay in America next season, which I'm sure he would do, because he's been very good. I would assume he's just going to take the risk. He probably will get traded, and he'll take another decent chunky deal next year off of somebody. I've said on the podcast before, I would offer extensions to Sagano and Eflin and say this is going to be 2 of our pitchers next season. Yep. It's not something that Elias has ever done, extend somebody or offer any pitcher multi-year deal. A change in strategy is needed. Those 2 guys, whatever you get back for them, they are not going to provide that value next season if they're still pitching and starting for us. But I would expect that we will continue with the strategy of trading these guys away and starting again next winter. But now we'll probably need 8 or 10 decent players next season. It's not just 1 or 2 free agents. We'll need a lot of new players next season.
That's the issue for me, though. You say, we need 8 or 10 next season, and I'm thinking we only needed a few this year. And I just don't have faith in Elias anymore. And looking at the man, as you say, he was crestfallen. I thought he was startled. I don't know whether he has faith in himself anymore. Listening to him the other day, he'd give a wooden leg cramp. I think he's just kind of treading water. I genuinely I don't have faith in him anymore. I would like to see a commitment and go, as you say, look, Sagano and Eflin give them the deals. I'd like to see Sedi extended because we've discussed the issues in the clubhouse and atmosphere, and that I think losing Sedi, it'd be not only for what he offers on the field and at the plate, but in that clubhouse, he's been there through the dark days. He's come out, and a lot of times, he's carried us through.
The thing that I worry about is if you look at the guys that we are probably going to trade, it's Mullins, O'Hearn, Eflin, Sagano. They have really been 4 of our most consistent players this season.
Yep.
So to trade those guys away, all right, you should get something useful back. Probably not for 2026, but you'll get a decent haul of A and AA players back. But it's going to be very difficult to replace them with existing players in the organisation. And as we've seen, free agents, you're not going to get a Ryan O'Hearn in free agency. We would be so lucky to do that, even if we did spend, a decent amount of money on it. He's just one of these guys that has found his home in Baltimore, loves playing for the Orioles, loves the fact that we've given him the chance to play every day and be the player that he probably always knew he was. I can see O'Hearn being a bit like Santander in that respect, where he does go somewhere else. He probably does get a 2 or 3 year deal for 40, 50, 60 million, and it doesn't happen the same as it's happened in Baltimore for him. So I think he is a player that if you sat down with him and said, there's 40 million quid, $40 million to finish your career with the Orioles, I think he would take it. I don't think we're going to do that though. It's just, Elias just pieces. It's okay piecing it together when you only need 1 or 2 players, but as we said, we're going to need. We're not going to start the season with 3 23-year-olds in the outfield, or 3
do you think
relatively young players.
Do you think Rubenstein sees that though? Obviously, he came in, he loves baseball, but he's not a baseball guy. And if the owner can't see what we need, and you're looking at Elias, he couldn't be trusted this off-season to bring in 3-4 players that we needed. How can you then commit to him going and getting 8 and 10?
Exactly.
And if he goes and gets 8 and 10, you're going to need 6 of them to work at least. He went out and got 3 or 4 this year, and the square root of
Sagano.
FA have worked, apart from Sagano.
Laureano's been okay, but a very slow start, and there almost wasn't a roster spot for him if everybody had been fit and healthy. I think with Rubenstein, I'm sure he's got his own views. He watches the games. He's got his own ambition about what he thinks this team should be doing. But if you're a business owner, you have got very used to separating the ownership from the day-to-day running. You have to defer these things to people that are doing it day-to-day. If you start trying to get too involved, that's where we get into Peter Angelos and the problems that we had previously, where then nobody buys into anything and there's nobody steering the ship. So my view is that Rubenstein, much like John Angelos did with Elias, he's just let him get on with it. And, unless Rubenstein gets to the point where he says, I am going to remove you and I'm going to hire somebody else, I think it's the Michael Elias show and it will continue to be. So that is a decision for end of September, probably.
Yeah, I tend to agree. The problem is we were a good team last year and we struggled to get 3 or 4 people to come through the front door. We're going to be coming off the back of what looks to be a very, very poor season, and trying to encourage people that are worth money to come to the Orioles to help us out is going to be an even harder job. And I think that's going to be one of the bigger problems. But you're going to have to do it.
To stump the money up.
Yeah,
it's
the money.
It's
the money's the thing that encourages them. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Money talks. Absolutely, money talks. But it's going to. We're having to overpay, as we probably have with Tyler O'Neill, to get mediocre talent. The problem is that we won't overpay for the really good players, and that's why you're talking about extending Sagano, extending. If you did that, you get good money and you get good players. The problem is you end up putting lots of money, and we can hark back to the Chris Davis deal, which we're still paying for another 400 years. So it's sometimes they go too far. it's a balance, isn't it? And that's the problem we're going to have this winter.
It's a vicious circle, but you see it in all sports. We see it especially being, soccer fans in the UK. I've seen it with my team, Everton, where we got bought out by owners. They brought in the equivalent of a general manager, the director of football. He's gone out and spent hundreds of millions of pounds, even more so on wages. Like the £100 million was just on fees, transfer fees. So you don't necessarily, you'd have cash considerations. Yeah. But it's not, you're paying £50 million for a centre midfielder, and then on top of that, giving him 200 grand a week. And then over a period of time, when you're not qualifying, not qualifying for Europe, you saw last night with United in the Europa League, they would have had a list of players for the summer to go and get, based on, we'll win the Europa League, we'll have Champions League football. That then entices them in. Now they haven't got that, and it's the same for us. We're going to be going into the end of this season decimated, also certainly decimated at the trade deadline. Probably stumble our way to 57, 60 wins if we carry on the way we're going. Need 8 or 10 players, and you're like, well, nobody wants to come. Like, you're just going to look and go, your organisation that looked like it was getting back to the days of in the 80s or near there is now gone back to what we know after the whole the 2000s. And what are you going to stump up? And then you'll get the players that shouldn't be getting the major money, and you're giving them major money just to fill out the numbers, and you see it across all sports.
Yep, agreed. So we've looked back a little bit. It's time to look forward. We always try to do this towards the end of the podcast. Look out of the frying pan into the fire. That's the home of the Green Monster, where we're going next. Our AL East competitors, the Boston Red Sox, for the first time this season. We open a 4-game series tonight. A couple of UK-friendly game times, Saturday, Sunday. There's a bit of doubt about the weather as we record this, with a cold, windy, miserable evening forecast. Grant, have you been able to do a little preview of the game? Weather-wise, looks like a typical Scottish summer day.
Yeah, well, the weather's been fantastic here, so I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sitting in flip-flops, Andy.
Have you done the lawn yet?
It needs done again, yeah. Fortunately, both teams have published all the pitching matchups, so there's no surprises there. There may well be a surprise with the weather, so there might be a reshuffle if there is. This is probably would end up a Saturday doubleheader, I would imagine, would be the preference if today's game is rained out, or game 1 is rained out. Fortunately, we've managed to miss Garrett Crochet, who is the kind of star ace of the Red Sox staff. He pitched in game 3 for the Mets, against the Mets this week. So game 1, scheduled for Thursday evening, will or should be Cade Povich v Lucas Giolito. On paper, this is a decent matchup for the O's. Giolito is sporting a 7.08 ERA. Obviously, Povich is 5 point something, but we know he's been hot or cold. Giolito has only played 5 games this season, but his last start against the Braves last weekend, he went 4 innings for 8 hits and was tagged with 6 earned runs, including 3 homers. So he's coming off a pretty ropey start. Let's see if we can get against him, get after him early in game 1. Game 2, scheduled for Friday evening, we'll have our friend of the pod, Charlie Morton. He is back in starting duties after a few weeks in the pen. He has also got an ERA of 7 point something, and he is up against right-handed starter Brian Bello for the Red Sox. Bello has started the season late. He will still be pitching his 7th game. He was looking good, but his last start did not go well. He went 4 1/3, 10 hits for 7 earned runs. So that was fresh off his last start. Let's hope for something similar. And help Charlie Morton out to get back on the horse. He has obviously looked a bit better in the last few weeks, so we hope that we get the Charlie Morton that was advertised as a kind of workhorse, doesn't miss his turn. We'll give you 5 competitive innings. We'll see if that materialises. So Game 3 scheduled for Saturday afternoon will be Zach Eflin against Hunter Robbins. Also a righty for Boston. On paper, this looks like the toughest matchup for the Orioles hitters. Dobbins sporting a 3.62 ERA. He has looked solid in all but one start this season. So a lot of quality starts from him. Obviously, from an Orioles point of view, we need Zach Eflin to bounce back from a poor outing last weekend. So let's hope that's just a one-off and we get back to seeing the Eflin that we have come accustomed to. And if we're still around, still alive, we're not lying bruised and battered on the floor. Sunday afternoon, we will see Dean Kramer against Walker Buehler. So all righties that we are facing in Boston, which generally should be good for us with a left-handed heavy lineup. Buehler has also been pretty solid for the Red Sox this season. He's got a 4.00 ERA. I did looking at his numbers, he did come out of the game early against the Mets earlier this week. He only threw 2 1/3 innings, didn't give up any hits or runs. However, our scouts tell us that this was due to an ejection after arguing with the umpire in the 3rd inning.
Yeah, about a strike. Yes, I saw the YouTube video.
He thought, I've now seen the YouTube video, and having checked the footage, I would have to side with the Red Sox pitcher on that one. Indeed. It was right down the middle.
It hurts, I know, to do that, but yes, I am so as well.
I did love what he was chirping at Soto, wasn't he? And someone else saying Soto looked happier in a Yankees uniform, and it just started going off from there.
So we are going to be facing possibly a fired-up Walker Buehler, and he will be pretty lightly raced, having only thrown 2 1/3 innings. So that is possibly one of the tougher matchups, especially if Kramer can't get back into any kind of form on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Thomas, any thoughts of any glimmers of hope for us in this series? Last time when we played the Yankees, we did have a little bit extra. We actually won a series. So I think we remember us winning a series once or twice this year. What do you think?
Look, I think going into Boston, we'll have a bit more confidence. The team have kind of broken that back of once we go behind not winning. We saw that last night, so that helped. It's always a tough task going into Boston. I love Boston. Outside of Baltimore, it's my favourite city in the States. I love it. But it's a tough place to go, taking on the Green Monster and everything that comes with playing at Fenway Park. I think, obviously, if the chairman of the Adley Rutschman fan club, Grant, his wishes keep coming true and he is turning a corner, I think we can go in here and maybe get a series win. My heart says we'll take the series 3-1. Avoiding Crochet obviously will help that. But my head, believe it or not, I do have some sense in between these ears. It's not just an empty void space. I think, a tied series 2-2 and get back home with a little bit more confidence, ready to take on the next week. Obviously, 2-2 doesn't do us any good getting closer to 500. But I think it's just, at the moment now, it's just trying to take positives from every game and try and stack them and hopefully get back home next week. And maybe who've we got next week at home? We've got the Cardinals and who else? Grant, come on, Grant, come on.
I've not checked. No, I'll need to start opening web pages for that. So we'll decide that on Sunday and chat about that.
Yeah,
we're very much going day to day at the moment, aren't we? We're not counting any blessings because it's worried. I agree. 2-2, I think it will just about get us a little bit further along the road, but we can't afford to lose many more series if we're going to get anything out of the series. And when I say anything about the season, and that's getting towards 500. So that's pretty much it. We're on the home straight, the end of this week's Midweek Showdown. I can't believe we're already up to episode 10, and the number of downloads is gaining momentum week on week, and I know Thomas is absolutely thrilled, as we all are, on the reach that we're getting. It's exceeded our wildest expectations. However, we don't sit on our laurels, and we're going to sit on our laurels with finishing on a positive. What's the positive for this week? I'll start with mine, and it's no surprise, as I am indeed the chairman of the Ryan O'Ham fan club. He's absolutely mashing it at the moment, and long may that continue. Doing really well. 4 for 6 yesterday, 2 ribbies, batting .306 with an OPS of .903. That leads the team, is not shabby. I just hope that the prediction that he gets traded in the next few weeks does not come true, and that he's here for next season to lead that left-handed team that we know and love. And he's even playing more first base this year over and above Ryan Mountcastle, which may err us towards which way it's going. But that's mine. What is yours, Grant?
Yeah, Ryan O'Hearn, professional hitter is how I would describe him. He's been fantastic for years now, not just this season. It will be pretty heartbreaking if he's traded, but given how I think he does have this affinity with the Orioles now, and this is his club, so let's see what happens. My positive for the week, hopefully, is that Adley home run in Game 3 in Milwaukee will spark something, not just Adley, spark the bats into life, and it would be absolutely amazing if at least one of these games in Boston we can actually score 10 or 12 runs and not be sitting sweating in the last few innings looking for a late hit or a couple of good bullpen outings. So we are certainly due, and if we can capture that kind of form from the later innings on Wednesday night, then that's my positive.
Perfect. So, Thomas, what is your positive? And you're only allowed to mention Jackson only once during this little interlude.
I'm not going to start off with him actually. Positive for me, I was made of see Kitters being back the other night. Much needed in that bullpen. But obviously, we all know it's coming. I need to mention my boy Jackson Holliday. Look, the kid's special. We knew it. I've mentioned that obviously last year the disappointments for it. He wouldn't have been more disappointed. There would have been nobody more disappointed than himself last year. But the pressure and everything he had. But look, he's a special guy. He's doing it now every day. I think he's got a huge series in Boston. I'm going to say it. I think we're going to see a big lead-off homer from him this series in Boston. He's just leading by example. For a kid his age, he's outstanding. On the subject of Adley, maybe he is tiptoeing towards... I'm not going to say the next few words. We all know what they're going to be. But yeah, look, it looks like he's getting his arse into gear finally. And if we continue to see a positive trend, then happy days, because we are better when he is better. That is no doubt.
Really like to see Jackson pop one over the Green Monster this week. It'll be a hard job. He can do it. He's got the opposite field, and he's starting to hit all over the field now.
He's hitting all around the park. I genuinely think. I think he has finally arrived. I think he's been that consistent, but I think he's going to have a monster series this weekend in Boston. I hope so. I hope he sours the Boston Tea Party.
Absolutely, we can throw a few teas over into the harbour. So that's it for the midweek shakedown. As always, please share the links far and wide on all the socials, including X, Insta, Blue Sky, and YouTube. We're also available on all good podcast sites and the bad ones as well. We'll be back with the full-length version after the weekend series with Boston, with it being released around 9 o'clock on Tuesday after our long UK bank holiday weekend. So it only leaves me to say, let's go O's, and see you next week.
Have a good bank holiday weekend, gents.
Let's go. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye now.